you just can't step back and stop trying cases because there's no substitute for that.
That's John Gomez, founder and CEO of Gomez Trial Attorneys out of San Diego, California.
It's like being a fighter to me. You got to be in the gym. Like, you could watch all the videos of how to fight you want, but if you're not in the gym fighting and training and sparring, then, you know, you're losing ground.
I'm Michael Mogul, founder and CEO of Crisp Video, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. This week, I sit down with renowned trial attorney John Gomez to discuss how going all in on your cases can pay huge dividends, lessons trial attorneys can learn from world-class athletes, and the importance of maintaining discipline in both business and in life.
To me, hardships are what shape champions. And so if you haven't been through hardship, how are you going to learn to answer the bell when times get tough?
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney Podcast. John Gomez is perhaps best known for the high-profile American Beauty case, and he has successfully honed this craft in trials both in and out of the media spotlight. I wanted to dive deep into John's motivations and the key lessons he learned while developing himself into the elite trial attorney he is today.
The first thing that I wanted to do when I opened the firm was to establish us as a real trial firm and myself as a real trial lawyer. So I devoted a whole bunch of energy to that. But at the same time, I've always thought that health was important. You know, I've always felt like my job as a trial lawyer and as the leader of an organization was to be present and available and physically able to do my job in the best way I possibly could. So I've always taken care of my health. I think I'm actually getting better at it now. I think there were a lot more late nights when I first started, a lot more sort of sleepless, nights and showing up after all-nighters and that kind of thing. But I'm getting more and more away from that and more toward just my optimal peak performance in everything I do.
So I want to give the listeners some context because your results are definitely atypical. I mean, I think since 2000, you guys have recovered over $500 million in settlements. You have over 100 separate recoveries of $1 million or more. What do you think it is that you guys are doing differently? Because most practices are driving those results.
Yeah, I think in terms of our brand and identity, I've always said we want to be known as a trial firm. And we've been very true to that in terms of our branding, in terms of what we do every day. And so we're completely willing to show up to court and actually try the case in front of a jury. And that's relatively uncommon, and if we take losses along the way, we take losses along the way. I don't penalize or berate my lawyers if they lose a trial. And so I think you get a good verdict and then you get another good verdict. And then maybe you get a third good verdict. And then lawyers in town kind of think, these are the guys that can handle a case like that. So I would probably say in terms of our branding, the one thing that I've done well, I think, is to really stay true to that core principle that we're going to be a trial firm.
Now, was there an experience early on that you had, whether it was a case or, it doesn't even have to be a case, but that you believe helped define what the firm would become?
Yeah, 100%. So I worked for this guy, very kind of well-known trial lawyer, and he kind of trained me. But what I learned was that oftentimes there can only be one kind of big dog, and it was his firm, and I was kind of feeling like I was going to be the second big dog, but that's never going to work. And so he basically kicked me out. And so I was on my own, starting the firm. And I had this case, very, very high profile case that he let me take with me involving the murder, very high profile murder called the American Beauty murder. It's all over Oxygen Network. This beautiful blonde woman poisons her husband to death. And so there was a wrongful death case against her in the county of San Diego where she worked on behalf of her deceased husband. And so we tried that case. And I remember we were basically on fumes. I had no money left. I burned through my 401k. My wife was working as a lawyer at the time. We burned through our savings. We were like right at the bottom, of things. But the news was in there every day, gavel to gavel coverage. And we ended up winning a $106 million verdict, and kind of things took off from there. So that was the first one. If we had lost that, I don't know where I'd be. I wouldn't be on this podcast.
Now, in terms of that case specifically, right? So that obviously that got a lot of media attention, but even then, like in getting the verdict that you got, there was probably the issue of being able to collect on that. And from what I recall and what I remember about this case is that one of the goals that you had was that she would not be able to monetize the book and all of this that came out of it as a result. But why was that so important to you?
Well, that was really important to the family. She was incarcerated for life. People were coming up to her with all these book deals and stuff because she's a very attractive, smart young lady. And the family wanted her never to be able to sell her story. Basically, the courts had ruled in the past that you can't prohibit a criminally convicted defendant from selling the rights to their story. It's an infringement of the First Amendment, that kind of thing. So she otherwise would have the right, but we wanted to shut that down and make it impossible for her to do it. And if she did it, we'd take all the money. And so that was one part of the case. The other part of the case was against the county where she worked, which was a much, much more difficult case.
And even through that experience, as you mentioned, you're clearing out the 401k, obviously taking a tremendous amount of risk, and this could have gone either way. How did you know that was the right decision in terms of taking that risk?
It was a case that I believed I could win. And it was a case that I knew would be very high profile. And frankly, back then, my risk tolerance and willingness to try any case was like off the charts, So back then I would try any case, anywhere against anyone for anything. And I knew that case would get a whole lot of publicity.
Now, that's interesting to me because, you see a lot of trial lawyers today that only want to try the cases that they know definitively that they're going to win. And, it was interesting. We had Mark O'Mara on the podcast, and he was just saying that, like, if you're not willing to take on the tough cases, like, what are you doing? But not only just in terms of risk tolerance, but how important do you feel it is for trial attorneys to take on the difficult cases?
Well, I think certainly as you build a reputation, that's the only choice you're going to have. I feel like I think now 8 verdicts of $1 million or more in which there was a zero offer pre-trial, just because those are the opportunities that were presented to me. And so as you come up, you're not going to get sort of the easy layup cases. And if you want to develop a reputation as a trial lawyer, of course, you have to try the difficult ones. I think, there comes a period of time where maybe you start dialing that back a little. Maybe you let, in my case, I let maybe the younger lawyers in my firm deal with those cases now a little bit more. But especially now with COVID, since I haven't been able to try a case for months and months and months, probably will be a year until I get back in there. I would try anything right now. I would try any case just to get back in there.
And let's even dial it back further. So going back to what even led you into the practice of law? Because you're someone who seems like, right person in the right role. Like, I don't know if there's anything else that you'd be doing where you'd be better suited to do.
Yeah, I think I was very lucky, and I agree. I'm not very talented at anything else. I don't know that I would have a whole lot of success at anything else. And the funny thing is, it was complete circumstance. I was in college playing football, and I had made friends with a guy who was 2 years ahead of me. And I just made friends with him because I was a busboy when I was in junior college at a place, and I had a buddy that knew him. And so we would run and lift weights together. He played soccer at Princeton. And so I got to know him. And he ended up going to law school at Stanford Law School and was my roommate during the summers when he was working as a law clerk. And here's the honest story. Here's why I became a lawyer. And it's a little embarrassing and not that idealistic or whatever. This guy, we lived at the beach, and he would come home every day from his law clerk job at about 2. And then we would ride our cruiser bikes down to the beach bars and drink and hang out and have fun. And he was getting paid some ungodly sum of money. and they had these parties for him, and it seemed fun. And we played on the softball team. And I said, oh, what a life. I want to be a lawyer. And so now he's the managing partner of Cooley Godward here in town. And it just turned out that I thought that looked like a pretty good life for a kid with no real professional aspirations, lawyers in my family or anything else. And I just followed his footsteps.
And in terms of what shaped you, I mean, from what I've understood, you did not have an easy childhood. If you wouldn't mind, I mean, even speaking to that in terms of what led to the John Gomez we see today.
Like a lot of trial lawyers, I didn't grow up with a lot. I would say that I had challenges, financially. We moved around a lot. I was an athlete, so that was always good. But life was tough. And I learned more than anything, just perseverance. I learned to work hard. I wasn't a great student in high school at all, but I wanted to play college football. And so I ended up at a junior college because I got hurt my senior year in high school. And then I got hurt again. And I had kind of time on my hands. And I said, well, I'm going to devote myself to school. And I ended up doing really well in school and just put that determination and perseverance and hard work to the issue of academics and then to college football. And I guess the rest is history. I feel like if anything defines me and my success, it's the willingness to work hard, perseverance, determination.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, you built a very successful trial firm. There's, obviously numerous firms, not only in just San Diego, but across the country, but they don't get the results that you guys get. So what do you believe is the biggest difference, or what do you believe is, I guess, the success factors that lead to the outcomes that you guys have experienced?
I think we've done some things well, and I've done some things well as a lawyer and as a leader. And the most important thing that I've done well is to cultivate and train and lead by example. And so we have very high standards. We provide our people all the training and resources and collaboration that you can imagine. So that part of things I've done very well. I've really developed a group of trial lawyers that are very, very talented and successful. And the beauty is only very recently, I would say, and I've been pretty good at marketing as well, I would say, okay, but only very recently have I really turned my attention to the important issue of the business of law. Now that I built the product, now I'm really, really engaged in the business. And I'm hopeful that, a few years down the line, people might see this story and go, wow, the firm was this kind of, smaller, very successful, but smaller trial firm, boutique-y kind of, but now look at them. That's my goal.
So how do you define success?
I think I define success, first of all, as being able to proudly look myself in the mirror every morning, being a good example to my children, helping our clients and helping improve the lives of all of our employees. I feel like we have a responsibility to a large community. And so for me, success is defined in terms of my ability to lead, inspire, and improve the lives of as many people as possible.
Yeah. And there's a school of thought that you have to choose between being the great trial lawyer or being the great business leader. And it seems like you've been able to do both. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of whether that can be balanced and how do you approach it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think historically I was, to the exclusion of everything else, I wanted to be a great trial lawyer. I would go to all the trial lawyer conferences and the seminars, and there's webinars on every day now about how to try a case and this and that. And I think I kind of overlooked the business, but now I'm all about the business. That's what really gets me going and gets my juices going. And so can people do both? I think so. I'm committed to doing both. And there's lawyers out there that I think do both. I would like to see myself. I think it's just a question of ensuring that you are doing the things that you do well. And so for me, that's being a visionary, that's trying cases, that's getting business. And so if I can offload all the other stuff, then I think it clearly leaves me time and energy to do both. That is run the business and try cases.
Yeah, and throughout everything, I feel like there's this undertone of like the standard of excellence that you've established just for the practice as a whole. And from what I recall, I think back in 2012, you went off the grid, or Wyoming rather, right? And you went to trial lawyers college. You basically left the practice, right? You left the practice, you left your family. Like, I guess talk me through what that decision was, and then also the experience of how that helped to elevate your game.
The trial lawyers college, it's a ranch. It's an institution based on a ranch in Du Bois, Wyoming, and basically was founded by Jerry Spence. At the time, the president was this guy, Jude Basil, who is currently a lawyer of counsel with my firm. And so I had some trial success, and he invited me to come. And I said, okay, I'll go. And you go out there for like 30 days, you're on a ranch, you really don't have Wi-Fi, you don't have computers, and you're really engaged in a journey to find your true vulnerable self. There's a lot of self-exploration. They engage in this process called psychodrama, which can get pretty intense. And you make these friendships and relationships for life. And I think the primary takeaway is it allows you to be very comfortable with yourself in front of a jury or just with other human beings.
Now, this has come up almost on every single podcast, and it's not, I don't think it's coincidence, because it seems like the most successful business leaders I speak with, this becomes something that is very important to them, which is knowing themselves. And when you talk about a concept like psychodrama, how important do you believe it is, just not even necessarily just for a trial lawyer, but just for a business leader to work through their own issues and like really go through that process just at some point in their life?
I think it's critical, because otherwise there are these barriers to your effective communication and reaction to life, that you don't even realize are there. Here's an example. Like, I grew up, I think, untrusting of people, because I didn't have, people weren't taking care of me, people weren't nice to me. So I never wanted to let anyone in. And so I would never talk to other people or get advice from other people or have mentors or, reach out for help ever. And that continued, through the initial formation of my firm. Now, I think because I've hopefully cleared my mind a little bit of that distrust through that work, if you have someone on your podcast, and I enjoy listening to them, I'm probably going to call them up and go, hey, I listened to what you had to say. Would you mind talking to me about it for another 45 minutes? And I've just benefited tremendously by that. And the same, I would say the same is true in front of a jury. If I'm holding back weird things or being insecure, that's going to show and inhibit my ability to communicate with them and really read the room and be emotionally congruent with what's going on.
Yeah, and to further elaborate on that, I mean, what do you think really separates the elite trial attorneys from everybody else? Like, what is it that they are doing differently, both in and outside of the courtroom?
The people I really admire have very different styles and approaches. Like you had Mark Lanier on, he's huge, hero of mine. Brian Panish out here in California is a friend of mine and a guy I admire a lot. There's tremendous female trial lawyers. So different styles, different, looks, different genders. But I think the consistent thing is that they have a commitment to excellence and they work really hard at it. And a lot of people don't see that. They say, oh, they're just naturally talented. And maybe there's a little bit of that, but I think it's all hard work. I think it's just commitment and repetition and hard work is really what defines, the great trial lawyers. And it's not exactly like an athlete, because there are freak athletes that can just go out and be freak athletes, but the Hall of Famers are the ones that worked on their craft. And I would say the same thing with trial lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we had Joe Fried on, and he mentioned something to the tune of that over the last 10 years, he's given over 500 presentations on trucking. It comes out to, I think, something like almost one a week for 10 years straight. And I think that a lot of people don't kind of see that. But what are some of the things that you've done to really hone your craft?
I have been kind of shameless about copying other people where it works for me. And so I'll get, transcripts from a lawyer that had a good result. I'll go and watch a lawyer that I admire. I'll go to their seminars. And then I'll just take little things. And I think the important thing is, one, you got to keep doing it. You just can't step back and stop trying cases, because there's no substitute for that. Like right now, everybody's watching webinars at home in their living room, and they're getting better at trying cases. Maybe a little bit, not really. I think they're getting worse because they're not trying cases. It's like being a fighter to me. You got to be in the gym. You could watch all the videos of how to fight you want, but if you're not in the gym fighting and training and sparring, then you're losing ground. And so for me, the most important thing, I take a little, I make it my own, and then I apply it. And I think the application is the most important. Staying in trial, staying in the moment, remaining engaged.
Yeah, and then there's the saying that true confidence can only be earned through results. Like you got to get the results, and you see a lot of ego, right? Which is not really the same thing as confidence. But over the years, obviously with the verdicts and your experiences in trial, do you believe that's what's really helped you to build your confidence? Just being in the courtroom, getting those verdicts, getting those outcomes, or was it something else?
I do think it's been results, because I haven't had a whole lot of easy wins. I've tried difficult cases and had, really great results. And I've lost some, certainly, but by and large, I've done pretty well with what I've been given. And I think that feeds upon itself and does provide some confidence and peace of mind. And certainly not ego, though. It's certainly not, I'm going to crush this person, or I'm the greatest, or anything like that.
What's the feeling that you have now when you're about to step into the courtroom? Do you still get nervous?
Yeah, certainly. I think I'm more excited than nervous. I'm not very nervous about talking to a jury anymore. I'm not that nervous about examining a witness. I do get nervous when we're waiting for the verdict. That part still does make me pretty nervous, but I wouldn't say I'm nervous during the trial itself, just because, I feel like I've seen most of what I can see. I plan, very much in advance. I feel like I'm well prepared. So maybe not so nervous there, maybe just a little rush of adrenaline, but other than that.
There's a quote by Robert F. Kennedy that resonates with many leaders. Only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. I wanted to know, what have been some of John's greatest failures?
I've certainly had failures in terms of trials. We had a period of time where I think the firm lost like 5 trials in a row, which is obviously very harmful to us financially. And none of them were very easy cases, but still that can kind of set you back on your heels a bit. I've made bad, I think, business decisions. I maybe hired some people I shouldn't have. There was a period of time where I grew too much. I grew very aggressively without really the capital to sustain that. And then we had the trial losses, and then we had some other litigation not go great. And so that was a very dark time, that I was like feeling like at the period I was going to lose the firm. I had to lay off like 12 to 15 people, which I've never had to do before. That was gut wrenching. That was a period of time where I wasn't sleeping much. I was worried about losing the firm. I was going through a divorce at the time, which made it even more fun.
I was like, now we're talking, right? I'm hearing this and I'm like, man, this is getting worse and worse.
It was brutal, man. I was sleeping in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had already made it as a trial lawyer, but then, I go through the divorce. The firm has a couple years, which aren't so great. And so I'm sleeping in this 2-bedroom apartment, awake at night, figuring out, am I going to be able to make next week's payroll? So I've been through that, and at that time I said, look, I had to step back. I said, what's working, what's not working? What do I have to do to get through this for the benefit of my really committed team members and myself and my family? And I just made some hard decisions. And, the funny thing is, when I laid those people off, they all seemed pretty understanding of it. And I did it myself. I felt, look, I'm the captain of the ship, and I let the ship get away from me. I need to face the music. And a lot of them are still staying in touch and are friends. And it worked out. It worked out great, because since then we've been on an upward trajectory.
Now, when you're in those darkest moments, because I was going to say it comes in threes, but in your case, it was more than three things happening simultaneously. How did you get through it? Meaning that, I'm sure there were multiple times where you're thinking, I'm going to shut the firm down. I mean, you could go work at another firm. There's other things, other decisions you could have made aside from kind of enduring down that same path. So how did you approach that?
I think perseverance. I've faced difficult circumstances in my life. I've been like without food. I've been dealing with, bad people in my life. So like having difficulties managing a law firm in the larger sense, to me, were always temporary. I always thought I could get through that. And I've always had, confidence in my own ability to make things right. And I just said, look, I'm going to grind and grind. I'm going to make decisive action, and then I'm going to grind. And I know we're good and we're going to come out fine. And so it was a combination of perseverance based on past hardship with a confidence in the future.
Do you believe, and this is something I think a lot about in the sense that, do you believe anyone can skip that process? So meaning that they may not deal with the same hardships, but can they skip hardships altogether to actually become a great law firm?
I think that's a hard question. I think it would be tough. I think it's, to me, it would be difficult to skip hardships to become a great performer in any business environment or human environment. To me, hardships are what shape champions. And so if you haven't been through hardship, how are you going to learn to answer the bell when times get tough? Could it happen? I imagine it could. Like your father runs a great law firm and then he just gives it to you and the firm is already clicking and you make it even better. I suppose that could happen and probably has happened. But the more enduring stories are born of some struggles along the way.
Yeah, and I found that it's almost a tragedy when that happens, or when somebody gets a huge verdict early on, right? And what you lose in that time, because I've met a lot of these people, and it just seems like they really struggle with their own confidence, they struggle with their own value, and it just because they just feel like they haven't earned it, right? When you come from just rock bottom and you build it up, I think that stays with you. No one can rob you of that courage.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is a peace of mind that you acquire through hardship.
So looking back, we look back at the last 20 plus years. Do you have any regrets?
I have two regrets. One, like I was one of those guys that got big verdicts right away. And so like very early in my career, I was a complete rock star trial attorney, a ton of money, and I probably had too much ego. And I was sometimes a bit of a moron, in terms of my behavior. I'd be out with bottle service and staying out late. And, I was married at the time. So that's certainly a regret, and that's a warning I would have for lawyers that have great success when they're, especially me. I grew up poor as hell. So I was like, I equate it to like a lot of these professional athletes that had nothing. Then they got millions with all this fame and they act like morons. That was me. So that's one regret. And then I would say at the same time, I probably was not as sensitive to the feelings of different people. I just was like, okay, suck it up, be a champion, win. What the fuck's the matter with you? Like that kind of guy. And now I recognize that there's a whole broad spectrum of human reactions to situations. And just because they don't react just like me doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And so both of those are probably just growing up, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I've always seen you as a disciplined person, just a very disciplined in terms of your routines, what you're doing in and out of the office. Were you always as disciplined, or did that evolve out of those situations?
I always have been disciplined, like in terms of like training. I've been a martial artist for a long, long time. I was a college athlete. And so I would always stay pretty healthy, but I would say alcohol consumption and use of other substances and my lifestyle got out of hand for a while. And that caused me to develop a whole lot more discipline in terms of my self-care and sort of self-centering and healthy lifestyle. So I have developed a lot more discipline than I had back then. But even in like high school and college, I was always the hardest working out, on any team that I played on. So I've had that, but I just got a little off track.
While the early days of John's career required tremendous resilience, in many ways his story transformed into one of redemption. How has overcoming adversity impacted John's personal and professional life? And to what does he attribute his growth into someone who leads by giving?
The funny thing is, over the years, I have learned about people that I barely know that just hate me and think terrible things about me. They have this preconception of who I am. And then sometimes they'll say, oh, I didn't realize you're actually a nice guy. Or, I had this guy reach out to me and he goes, hey, John, I haven't, come to the meet. I host these meetings in my law firm for a group. I just let them use my courtroom. And he goes, I didn't come before because I was jealous of you. And there's just this community of people that I think maybe there was a period of my life where I earned it, where people did not like me, some with good reason. I always tried to be nice to everybody, but I was a bit of an ass. But even now, like, there are people that dislike me. And so is it a redemption story? Yeah. I think you can't help but feel that a little bit. And I've gotten to the point where I don't really care. If people don't like me, I know the life that I live. I know how I try to help people. But I think it's important for me. I feel like I was on the rocks so much. I feel like God interceded and chose me and saved me from a lot of harm and or death and or just not being around. And I owe it to him and to myself and to everyone to give it back in a positive way. So yeah, I feel like it's a good chapter in my life right now.
Yeah. It seems like your faith is very important to you, your health, your family. You've surrounded yourself with an exceptional team. I mean, I think it's a very, great place to be, but it also, and I appreciate you sharing everything that led to that, right? That road that, in a way, it's almost like you've earned it. And then you've been very proactive about it, because I know when you shared the story that, earlier on in the practice where you had to let some people go, you fast forward several years in the COVID times, firms around the nation are letting people go. They're furloughing their teams, they're cutting pay. You guys didn't do any of that.
No. Once you build a team that's committed and talented and that you have trust in, I don't want to do anything to interrupt or violate that relationship of trust. And I feel like like I said before, I'm the captain of the ship. And if I'm running the firm in a way that I feel like I got to fire people like a week after the onset of this disease, then I'm not doing a very good job. And thankfully now we have the data. We actually have the data so we can see how much money we'll have when. And I knew that, we had enough money to keep them on. And I think there comes a moral choice as a leader. I can't speak for everyone, but a lot of those layoffs and furloughs and reductions weren't so much for survival, but to put more money in the boss's pocket. And that doesn't seem right to me, because there's going to be plenty of money in the boss's pocket once this thing gets over. And so, hang on to your crew now, treat them well, and then reap the benefits on the other side.
Agreed. So what are some of the things, you do on a day-to-day basis or even a week-to-week basis that help you stay in peak state?
I do this thing called morning routine. Every morning I get up at about usually 4:20, 4:15, 4:20, get up and I meditate. So I do transcendental meditation. I'm trained in that. So I do that. Then I pray. I read the Bible for a little bit. And that kind of starts my day, off right. I do something physical pretty much every day. And so I really am a big fan of, I like Jiu Jitsu. I train in Jiu Jitsu. I do judo, which is very similar. And I do Bikram hot yoga, which is to me, like very good for an older guy like me trying to do the jiu-jitsu and judo. And very if I do that during trial, I'll go in and I'll be doing the yoga. And then all of a sudden, just this thought will come to me that clarifies everything. And so otherwise, I try to spend super quality time with my kids. I take them to their soccer practices or whatever practices, try to watch all their games. I've coached them all. I just try to give quality time to the people around me. And I try to get good sleep, eat well, not ever go to a club or stay out late at a bar ever. So that's basically where I'm at right now.
Now, let's talk about Jiu Jitsu, because it's clear that you're very passionate about that. And so I'm not a practitioner myself yet, but from everything I've heard about Jiu Jitsu is that if you ever come in with ego, that'll get out of you pretty quick. Do you see any parallels between Jiu Jitsu and even being a trial attorney?
Yeah, lots. The thing I like about it is that it just crushes me. Like where I train, everybody's better than me, I feel like. And everybody's younger than me. And so I like to do things that when I'm driving there or on the way, I'm a little scared. Like that adrenaline kind of gets in you and you're like a little scared and you're like, oh shoot, what's going to happen? Am I going to get my ass kicked today? Or am I going to survive? Or how is this going to go? And that's the way I feel every time that I'm on the way to do that. And I think that's a great thing for anyone that has had any kind of success in any other aspect of their life. Because on the mat, they don't know. I mean, maybe a couple of them know I'm a lawyer, but they could give a shit about any verdict or what kind of house I live in or anything like that. And so I think it removes a lot of ego in life. And then once you get into court, it provides you a confidence, to be sure, but I think it removes an ego because you are completely worthless. You're trying your best and you're doing your best. And I don't want to overplay it, but it's certainly an ego smashing activity for me.
Yeah, well, look, I'll tell you, the people listening, I don't know that they're going to be, that was the greatest pitch for why they should get into jiu-jitsu, but I hear that side of it in the sense that I've constantly stressed, even to our team and to people I mentor, the importance of not just losing, but just doing difficult things, being able to just to win the day in some capacity. So like you just described, when you're going there and you're scared, you're going to get your ass kicked basically. But, a rational person will look at that and say, well, why would you ever do that, right? Like, why would you ever go?
Yeah, you could say the same thing about hot yoga. Very difficult, hard to breathe, and I will say, just because I don't want to say jiu-jitsu is bad, these are some of the best people on earth. Like they would never maliciously hurt you. There's little physical risk of actual harm. It's really just losing the ego. And over time, you get better and do better. And I do fine, so I don't want to overplay it. If you're thinking about doing it, I highly encourage everyone to do it. Many, many people say it's the best sort of physical and mental thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah. And to me, the parallel, it seems, even as a practicing trial attorney, the importance of really putting yourself out there, being willing to suck, right? Especially at the very beginning. I mean, it was the same thing for me when I started CrossFit. I was doing weight training for years, and I started CrossFit. I came in, I was the absolute worst person in that entire facility. I mean, they do leaderboards, and I was at the bottom of the leaderboard. And I think a normal person gets discouraged and says, I'm never coming back. I was so excited because I was like, now I have the opportunity to get better at this, right? Like, I'm not going to come in here every day to be at the bottom of the leaderboard. But I feel that many times people almost withhold that opportunity for themselves to grow and improve by not doing difficult things.
I totally agree. And whether it be, I love getting into litigations that I really don't know that much about, or, trying a case against a great lawyer. I used to box, then I got too old to box, but like on sparring Fridays, being a little bit scared about what was going to happen, I think is a tremendous opportunity for growth.
Clearly, John Gomez is a trial attorney and business leader who has not only forged his own path, but is cultivating a legacy of great impact. So what does being a game changer mean to John?
Whether another person's a game changer for me or I'm a game changer for them, to me, it means that this person is a person others will look to and emulate in some regard. And so you're not only changing the game, you're changing someone else. There have been many game changers that have changed my outlook on law and business and life. And that's really what a game changer is, a person that others look to and they say, wow, look at the way they do that or approach that or explain that. I want to be like that. I want to copy that. I want to emulate that. To me, that's not only a game changer, that's a life changer.
I want to give a huge thank you to John Gomez for taking the time to speak with us today. What particularly resonated for me was how John has translated his personal passion for being in the courtroom into building up a team of elite trial lawyers that he has cultivated, trained, and led by example. You've been listening to the Game Changing Attorney Podcast with me, Michael Mogul. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the podcast with at least one other ambitious law firm owner who you believe would benefit. And you know what? Maybe more than one. For more information on our interview with John Gomez, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit GameChangingAttorney.com. And join us next time when we'll be speaking to the CEO of Whoop, Will Ahmed, about unlocking human performance. Yes, you heard that right.
Pop culture health stuff has been very one size fits all. The flavor of the month is paleo. The flavor of the month is keto. The flavor of the month is melatonin before bed, whatever, right? And that's what you should do. And I just think that's BS, right?
That's next time on the Game Changing Attorney Podcast.